the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips. We have a very interesting broadcast planned for you. Our two guests are men who have been right in the middle of history. They are Attorney John Clark and Mr. Patrick Knowlton. Their names are probably not well known to you, but these are two men who have put their own careers, their lives, and their reputations on the line as part of an effort to seek the truth. Patrick, why don't you begin with the day you drove into Fort Marcy Park?
Well, for the listening audience, we are talking about the Vince Foster case, and I was a Whitewater grand jury witness, Howard, as you know. I drove into Fort Marcy Park on July 20th, 1993. What I saw in the park was two cars. I later that evening, after finding out Mr. Foster was dead, I called the park police, and I told the park police I'd seen these two cars in the parking lot. One car was an old rust brown car with Arkansas license plates, and the other car was a light blue, metallic blue car with a gentleman, a man in the car. That was the end of that. I never heard from the park police again. I never followed the Foster case. I had no idea that, I heard a guy who committed suicide, and I figured that was it. What I saw in the park, this guy acting very suspicious in the blue car, which, made me aware of my surroundings. After I called the park police, that was it. It wasn't until 9 months later, and John may have to intervene here because I get the dates mixed up sometimes, but 9 months later I was contacted by the FBI. FBI took over the investigation with the Fisk investigation. And
Fisk was Ken Starr's predecessor as
correct.
Independent counsel.
That's correct. I was called by them. I was brought into their office. I was interviewed by Larry Monroe and William Columbell, two FBI agents who were assigned to Fisk.
As I recall your story, your account, to put it bluntly, you drove into the park to heed the call of nature.
That's true. That's true.
And you saw a very ominous, threatening kind of fellow there who was
correct.
Looking at you in a threatening way.
Yeah, he that's what I say. My awareness was brought to its height because this guy made me nervous at first, and so I was paying close attention to him. There was only two cars in the parking lot in mine, so I remembered very well what I saw.
You were there at a time that was inconvenient for him, it would seem.
I think so. I was there at 4:30. They found Mr. Foster's body. His body was found at 5:45, so I was there about 70 minutes for the discovery of the body. As I was saying, the FBI then interviewed me, Mr. William Columbell and Larry Monroe, and they wanted to talk about the car that I saw. They were very concerned about this vehicle that I saw, and like I say, I saw an older rust brown Honda. Mr. Monroe showed me these various photographs of a Honda, pictures of a Honda that was taken in the parking lot at the U.S. Park Police headquarters, not in the park itself, but in the U.S. Park Police headquarters, where they had allegedly parked the car after towing it from Fort Marcy Park. I looked at the pictures. I told Mr. Monroe and Mr. Columbell it wasn't the car I saw in the park.
So in other words, the park police had obtained Vince Foster's real car.
The pictures.
It was Vince Foster's car that they had.
I still don't know if it was Vince Foster's car that I saw. I have no idea.
They represented that what they had was Vince Foster's car.
Right.
But the car that you saw looked very different.
Totally different.
Than what they said was Vince Foster's
Exactly.
car. And they were upset that your story didn't fit their story.
That's true. And so when I got ready to leave after this 2.5-hour FBI interview, Mr. Monroe, Agent Monroe, said to me, "Don't go to the press with this story about the car. It's not good for the Fosters or the president," or something to that effect. And I just said, I didn't plan on it. I never thought about going to the press about anything.
So the FBI told you to keep quiet.
Keep quiet, exactly. So I did keep quiet. About 3 weeks later, or 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they called me back in for another interview, and this time they wanted to make sure that I was really sure about the car I saw, this rust brown, color like your desk here. Again, he showed me some pictures. He read me some interviews of the park police who had said they saw a grayish brown car, and I kept saying, well, the car that I saw was older than the pictures you're showing me. It's a totally different color. Went over to the FBI laboratory. That's where Mr. Frederick Whitehurst had been demoted from bomb expert to a paint expert. And Mr. Whitehurst was in the laboratory. He took me to the paint panel section. I pulled out the panels that fit the color of the car that I saw in Fort Marcy Park. and they fit an 83 or an 84 Honda Accord. And Mr. Foster's car, of course, was an 89 Honda.
89 silver color.
Silver. So in my FBI reports, after I was, again, I was contacted by Ambrose Evans Pritchard.
Now, who is Mr. Pritchard? I know who he is, but you tell us.
Mr. Pritchard is he was the London bureau chief here in Washington, D.C. for the London Sunday Telegraph.
He was a reputable journalist from the United Kingdom.
That's right, absolutely. And he brought me into his office. He showed me his what he had obtained, or somebody obtained these files from the FBI, the 302s, the statements that they type up after they take notes of your interview. And I started reading the interview, and the first thing that caught my eye was they said that I saw an 88 to a 90 Honda Accord.
So this is important. The FBI, in their official version, changed your testimony.
Absolutely.
Without your knowledge or permission.
Absolutely. I had no idea what they had changed my story. Actually, then they said that the guy that was in the park, at the time I was being interviewed, they said, could you recognize this guy? And I said, well, if you show me a lineup or a photo spread, I could pick the guy out with no problem. Well, in the report, they said I couldn't identify the guy now or any time in the future, which was another fabrication. Then there was many other things all the way through. It was just,
so there was hostility toward you on the part of the people interviewing you.
Yeah, there was hostility when I was being interviewed, but I mean, I just thought it was the nature of the job, and I was nervous anyways. I'd never been called in to be interviewed by the FBI or any agency for that matter. Excuse me. So,
did the park police ever interview you?
No, park police never called. I mean, I initiated the call myself. So,
who was the first journalist to talk to you? Was it Pritchard or someone else?
Yeah, Pritchard was the first.
And what was Pritchard's message? Was he skeptical of you at the beginning?
Yeah, because when I started telling him, we met at a coffee shop, I started telling him the story, and he asked me if I was lying, and I said, lying? What would I be lying about? So that's when I went back to his office. He showed me the reports, and that's when I started saying, well, the FBI's lying.
So in other words, he had reason to think you were lying because everybody thinks the FBI always tells the truth.
Well, I did.
And their story was different than yours.
Right.
About what you had said and seen.
Exactly. So,
but you won this journalist's confidence.
Yes,
and he figured out that you were telling the truth, and the government of the United States was telling the lies.
That's right. The FBI was definitely misrepresented what I said completely. They lied. I mean, they lied about what I said.
When did this occur with Pritchard?
This was on October 13th of 1995.
Did he then write it up right away?
He wrote it up within about 7 days. He called me on the phone and said it was going to be out in the Sunday's paper, the 21st or 22nd. I'm not clear on the dates.
In London?
In London. And that newspaper came out, and I think I'll let John fill in a little bit from here.
Fill in the narrative.
Again, just to kind of briefly recap, you saw these events in Fort Marcy Park, and what Patrick saw was an older brown Honda. Mr. Foster's car was a newer silver-colored Honda. And incidentally, the car that Patrick saw also had Arkansas plates, and it was parked in the very spot where Mr. Foster's car was later found. And we now know from the forensic evidence that Mr. Foster was dead well before Patrick was in the park. So that
long before his body was delivered to the park.
Right, right. Well, actually, we don't really know where if his body was in the park at this time or not. We don't know, but we know that he was dead by then, and therefore he couldn't have driven to the park. So in any event, the FBI sort of tried to obtain this admission from Patrick that the car that he saw could have been Vince Foster's car, and having failed to obtain that admission, they falsified the report. They said it was 1988 to 1990. The car color panels that Patrick had picked out correspond only to one in 1983 or 1984 car.
Have you considered a defamation action against the FBI?
No, they're immune from that sort of suit, but we have filed suit. I'll get to that in a second. So later on, of course, Patrick's interviewed, and he sees these reports, and he says, hey, these are lies. And this is actually 27 months after the incident, and that paper, the London Sunday Telegraph, came out on October 22nd, 1995 in London. It appeared on American newsstands on the 24th. That's a Tuesday. Now, that same day that it appeared on the U.S. newsstands, Mr. Starr's Office of Independent Counsel prepared a subpoena for Patrick to testify before the Whitewater grand jury. And they delivered the subpoena, presumably to the FBI that day. Now, the FBI didn't serve it that day. They waited for 2 more days until Thursday, October 27th. And they served Patrick the subpoena. Well, we think we know why. It was to line up these men who harassed Patrick beginning the same day that he received this secret grand jury subpoena. Now,
so in other words, you believe the FBI not only falsified his testimony, Patrick's testimony, they were so much in hock to the Justice Department and the White House that they participated in an effort to intimidate Patrick.
Right. Well, what we find when we review the investigative history of the Foster case is that no one has investigated except for the FBI. I mean, even during the course of the first 16-day U.S. Park Police investigation, that was really a joint investigation. That wasn't just Park Police. That was Park Police and FBI. And the FBI interviewed, far more witnesses than the Park Police did, although that's not generally known. But anyway, so this Patrick was harassed for a period of 2 days by at least 25 men, beginning the same day that he received this secret grand jury.
25 men.
Right. Now it
more.
sounds like he's a little nuts. And we've talked to a number of experts about this, and six of them have each independently of one another told us that the purpose of this intimidation, this harassment, is to make the witness look crazy and to destabilize him prior to his appearance before the grand jury.
How do you know there were 25?
Well, because Patrick was counting them. He was he was accompanied had witnesses both days that this happened. It was 11 one day, I believe 13 the next day, and then a couple days later a few more.
These men were grouped together?
They were. I think Patrick, should describe this intimidation, but before he does, let me just sort of jump ahead and tell you what we've done. In the meantime, we filed suit against these two FBI agents and a number of other individuals, saying that they are liable for what happened to Patrick, which is a civil rights violation to intimidate a witness before he testifies, that they are liable under what's called conspiracy liability. Now, under conspiracy liability, all members of the conspiracy are going to be liable for Patrick's, for this civil rights violation.
Can you identify particular people, or are there witnesses to what Patrick saw?
Well, we have identified two of the individuals who intimidated Patrick, but under conspiracy liability, all members of the conspiracy are liable for this civil rights violation. So, therefore, the issue of whether or not there is a cover-up is relevant in the civil case. We filed suit in federal district court in Washington. And so during the course of researching the case and finding, whether or not there is in fact a conspiracy and who's a member of it, some of the things that we have found are just absolutely astounding. I mean,
we have a minute before the break. Tell us what you can in that minute.
Well, what we found, for instance, that Mr. Foster, the official version is that Mr. Foster drove his car to Fort Marcy Park, walked 700 feet up into the park, placed a revolver into his mouth, pulled the trigger, entrance wound in the soft palate of his mouth, and a large exit wound in the top of the back of his head. And what we found is that first of all, that just didn't happen. Out of 25 witnesses who viewed the body before the autopsy, there is no record of even one of them having seen this large exit wound in the top of the back of the head. What we do have is the testimony of one U.S. Park Police officer who gloved up and probed, felt around the head. He said there was no exit wound, and we found it just goes on and on from there. The autopsy doctor began the autopsy before the police arrived, and that's in violation of the...
We're going to have to stop here, but I want to continue this story. Please stay with us for these messages, and when we return, we're going to hear more about the strange death of Vince Foster and the official cover-up of the circumstances surrounding that death. Please stay with us. Hello, I'm Howard Phillips. The Conservative Caucus has been actively fighting since 1974 for less expensive government and lower taxes imposed upon the American people by the federal government. If you want to become part of our effort to reduce the size and cost and regulatory burden of the federal government, I hope you will call the number shown on your screen.
For more information about the Conservative Caucus, write us at 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia, 22180, or call 703-938-9626. Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips. My guests are Patrick Knowlton and his attorney John Clark. We're discussing the Robert Fisk, Ken Starr, Janet Reno, FBI cover-up of the mysterious death of Vince Foster, former counsel to President Clinton, former law partner of Hillary Rodham Clinton. Please continue what you were saying.
Yes, I was going to tell you a little bit about the harassment that took place on the 24th of October after I was served a subpoena by the FBI agent who worked for Ken Starr's office. Served me a subpoena, told me there was nothing to worry about, gave me a card, said if you have any problems, give me a call. He said, you're not a target, you're not a suspect, but have my card if you have any problems. And I said, okay, thanks. Well, that evening, I called my girlfriend on the phone. She lived in the same building. I called her on the phone. We made plans to go to dinner at 7:15. We'd leave and walk over. So at 7:15, we'd leave the apartment building. We start walking towards the DuPont Circle area of Washington, D.C. And as we're walking along, I'm talking to her, probably talking to her about the subpoena or about my concerns about going before a grand jury. Of course, never doing anything like that, so I was a little uptight. And as we're walking along, she just happened to say, well, why is this guy staring at you? And I looked up, and there's somebody about 25 feet away from me, and he's got his eyes locked right on my face. And so I just looked down and continued to talk to her. She's on my left-hand side. And again, she says, this guy is still staring right at you. And I look up, and this guy's pretty husky guy, well-built, haircut, really military type. And he got about 10 feet away, and she said, he's still looking at you. So this guy, walks towards me and walks by us and continues to stare at me, like right into my face. Didn't look at anything else. Like, didn't look at my girlfriend, just looked right into my face. So we sort of stopped in the middle of the block, and we watched the guy walk down. He had his head turned, still looking at me as he was walking, which I thought was quite a unique trick. And he stopped at the corner, and he raised his left hand up to his mouth and started talking into his sleeve. And my girlfriend and I started laughing. We were like, what is this guy doing? So we turn and start walking. And so as soon as we start, get about maybe another 10 or 15 feet, another guy comes walking right directly at me. This time he's got his eyes locked right on my face. He's walking directly at me. He gets about 5 feet away from me, takes a cut to the right, and then walks by my girlfriend again, turns his head, and keeps staring at me. So we stop again, and he meets this guy in the corner. So those two are on the corner together. And I didn't relate it to the subpoena. I didn't relate it to Whitewater or Ken Starr. I didn't relate it to any of that kind of stuff. So we continued to walk, and then within probably 20 seconds, another guy approached from the right. He passed me on the right-hand side, the lock-eyed stare. Then there was the fourth guy, the fifth guy. Like, they were all in tandem. And about with the sixth and seventh guy, when it got to that point, I got a little nervous. So I was really more afraid for my girlfriend at that point because she was really upset. And then I realized it must have something to do with the subpoena. And then it was the sixth guy, the seventh guy, the eighth guy, and then the ninth guy. And I was like, at that time, I was scared. I thought I was going to be killed. I mean, it's hard to explain to your listeners and what kind of effect this can have when you have people walking at you. I mean, actually, ice stares right into your face, and that's all they're looking at. And it's a very fierce kind of look, and it really hits deep inside. And I didn't realize that until a couple of days later. I was pretty skittish for actually the next 6 months. But it happened that day. The next day, Chris Ruddy came by. I called Ambrose that night and complained. I told him I was very angry, first of all, that he wrote the article, put it in the paper, and it got me subpoenaed. And I was just really angry about that. I didn't want any involvement in this kind of stuff. The next day, Chris Ruddy comes over, and I'm getting phone calls from other press people, And Chris Ruddy comes over, and he says, well, come out for a walk with me, and let's see if anything happens. I'm like, I don't want to leave. He said, well, come on, let's go out. So we walk out the door. Once again, I'm out my house 15 seconds, and I'm approached by somebody. Then we were followed. Same thing with people talking into their, they weren't hiding it. They were making it very obvious, which really made me really...
So they wanted to know that you were being watched.
Oh, they wanted me to know, absolutely. They wanted me to know that they were onto me. They knew who I was, and that really frightened me.
Do you have any idea who these people were?
Well, I don't.
We identified two of them. We have their names, addresses. They're defendants in our lawsuit now.
And what is their occupation?
I don't know. They're both Jordanian. I don't. They're obviously what they call stringers. They're just hired to do this one job. They're not permanent employees of the.
So they could have been working for the FBI or for Terry Lenzner, who's the president's investigator.
Sure.
Any one of a number of people.
Right. Assume the FBI.
Sure.
For the sake of argument, I'd say the FBI.
Yeah, but again, we don't, for the purposes of our lawsuit that we have pending now in Washington, we don't we're not just naming the defendants. The potential defendants are all the members of the cover-up under the liability that we've asserted. So, as I was talking earlier about this, about the evidence, and I'll just talk about very briefly about just only some of it, because I mean it's just everywhere you look. I was talking earlier about how the autopsy began before the police arrived, and the autopsy doctor was assisted by an unnamed assistant, which is very unusual in the Northern Virginia medical examiner's office. And he was not identified. The police arrived. This doctor, Dr. Beyer, refused to tell the police who the man was. And of all things to do before the police arrived, they removed the only evidence of the entrance wound, which is in the soft palate. And Dr. Beyer reported that there was no gunpowder on the face, lips, anywhere, or in the mouth, with the exception of on the soft palate, which he had removed.
He also removed the tongue too.
He also removed the tongue. Now his own laboratory looked at 13 slides of the soft palate, looking for the gunpowder that Dr. Beyer said was grossly present, meaning you could see it with the naked eye. Not one trace of it. It just wasn't there. And then we go back to, we look at some of the testimony, and we talked to, for instance, one witness, a very experienced paramedic, was at the park. He said, hey, I saw a bullet wound in Mr. Foster's neck, right below the jawline, and they asked him on deposition, well, suppose I told you that this was not a homicide. He coded it as a homicide. He said, suppose I told you it was a suicide. Would that change your mind as to whether or not you saw the bullet wound where you think you saw it? And this was 9 months later. He said, no, I don't care what the coroner's report says. And I'm quoting, I don't care what the coroner's report says. I saw what, excuse me, I saw what I saw. And I'm not going to change my story. And we found the medical examiner's report, that is the medical examiner who saw the body in Fort Marcy Park, not the autopsy doctor. We found that in the National Archives 4 days after Mr. Starr had filed his report with the court, with the three-judge panel. And that report has obviously been altered on the front page, and it appears as if a four-letter word has been whited out under cause of death, which was gunshot wound. And then on the back page, which apparently the forger, the falsifier, did not know because Dr. Haught's signature appeared on the front, on the back page it said gunshot wound, mouth to neck. He had a neck wound. I mean, again, this just goes on and on and on. The gun.
So the reports are not consistent.
Well, it's so obvious. The gun that was found in the park had Remington cartridges in it, 2 bullets manufactured by Remington. Well, the gunpowder that was found on Mr. Foster is called ball smokeless powder. Remington has never used that type of powder in the manufacture of any of its ammunition.
We have only a minute left. Where does this now stand?
Well, we filed with the Special Division, the three-judge Court of Appeals panel, hundreds of pages of evidence of a cover-up, and we asked the judge to order Mr. Starr, the three-judge panel, to order Mr. Starr to attach our submission to his report. So they agreed over Mr. Starr's objection. They summarily denied his motion to reconsider, and they attached evidence of a cover-up by his own investigators to his own report. And that's certainly the first time anything like that has ever happened in the history of the independent counsel statute, but the American people don't know about it,
What's
unfortunately. Next? We're going to go forward with a civil suit, and we're going back. We'll be going back to the three-judge Court of Appeals panel for more action in this case.
If you are interested in learning more about this historically significant detective story, please stay with us. And after these messages, Mr. Clark and Mr. Knowlton will tell you how you can get additional information. Please stay with us.
In every major war of the 20th century, control of the Panama Canal has been strategically crucial to America's military. Now the great U.S. Navy is no longer a two-ocean navy, and the Red Chinese military knows very well that control of the isthmus is more important than ever. That's why Red China now seeks control of the 2 crucial ports on each side of the Panama Canal. If Congress fails to give our military the funds to maintain U.S. bases in Panama, Red China will fill the vacuum, giving a communist superpower a hammerlock grip on the path between the seas. Right now, there's no money in the defense budget to keep our U.S. bases in Panama. And even as we reduce our defense spending, Red China boosts theirs with $40 billion each year coming from us as the result of MFN, Most Favored Nation status. We the people, along with our leaders in Congress and at the White House, have a duty to preserve, protect, and defend America's vital interests.
Welcome back. The Conservative Caucus has been working on the Clinton crimes really since 1994. If you want to tune into our website, it's www.conservativeusa.org. Patrick, off air, you told me that on a day when you filed your brief, or shortly thereafter, your phone rang, and what did you hear?
Well, actually, there was a message left for me, Howard. And,
it was on your answering machine.
It was on my answering machine, and it was 5 gunshots.
Bang, 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 bang.
And I kept on...
Someone was sending you a message.
Yeah, somebody was definitely sending me a message. I played them for my attorney, and I played them for other people, so they would know that I wasn't crazy, and I was somewhere else when it happened, so, you know, and it wasn't anybody that I know. And it was...
Well, we know that the Clintons have been vicious in trying to denigrate and hurt their adversaries, and there have been people who've died under suspicious circumstances, including Vince Foster. John, why don't you use the balance of the time? Tell people how they can learn more, and then tell us what's important.
Well, thanks, Howard. Yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about why this is important. I mean, certainly it's important, I think, for us to know whether or not...
What's the address before you forget it?
It's 1730 K Street, Northwest.
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. That's Suite 304. It's John H. Clark.
Zip?
20006.
Good. Proceed.
I was talking about why this is so important, and it certainly is important, I think, for us to know that our government is guilty of covering up an apparent, foul play.
A major crime.
A major crime. That's very important to know, but I think it's more important in this case because it really tells us something about the way that our fundamental democratic society functions, and that's not an overstatement. It tells us that we can't rely on Congress to expose government corruption and exercise their oversight.
Patrick and John, thanks for your courageous leadership in this. I know it's at a sacrifice, and thank you for joining us.